I'm beginning to think like Garrett Graves, and all of my questions are exactly what Garrett asked. So I've got to make this up as we go along. Thinking like Garrett is scary, especially being from Alabama. Roll Tide just for Garrett's purpose. Mr. Spinrad, help me fill in some blanks here. How much did you say we were budgeting for the Rice's Well study in your opening statement? You said billions?
It was certainly not billions. I'd have to get back to you with the exact number.
Well, you got it in your notes right there. While you're looking, how many strikes did you say we had last year?
On Rice's Well or North Atlantic right wells?
Well, let's just take Rice's Wells for the moment.
So I don't have records of any strikes on Rice's Wells.
No strikes in the Gulf.
Which is why, of course, we're not putting a rulemaking in place for vessel strike rule on Rice's Well.
So how many have we killed in the Gulf?
Rice's Well, I'm not aware of any mortalities.
No mortalities in the Gulf. So you're talking about just the East Coast. So you're talking about primarily the Brutus Well? The Brutus Well, correct?
Rice's Well.
Brutus?
Rice's Well.
Okay. So your picture right there, is that a Brutus or a Rice's?
That's a Rice's Well.
How do you tell the difference?
I can't, but our experts can. We have experts.
Do you know how they tell the difference?
They look at fluke markings, they look at size, they look at shape, they look at the same things you'd use to identify basically any other marine mammal.
According to what I read, they cracked the skull open, and that's how they figure it out. So
no, not for these. These were aerial surveys, sir, that were done without any harassment or impact on the animal.
All right. What I'm saying is you have to crack the skull open to actually tell the difference between a Brutus and a Rice's, and we're talking about, you're trying to talk about two different wells. I don't think we're talking about two different wells. So the West Coast, the East Coast well, well, let's call it the East Coast well. Have we done any studies on these windmills to see how it affects these wells?
We have looked at the acoustic signatures of the operations to put the wind turbines in the water, and we find no conclusive evidence of harassment as defined by the Marine Mammal Protection Act on the whales.
I just find that totally, I mean, a fish that does all of its hunting and traveling based on acoustics, I don't see how that's possible. That's common sense. Obviously, I'm not a scientist. So these three that were killed in the Gulf, East Coast, how many of those were dead strikes before they hit them? Do we know if the ship actually killed them, or were they dead floating fish that they hit?
Well, they were obviously struck, and the nature of the damage.
Well, that's obvious. They wouldn't be on the ship, but were they dead when they were hit?
No, it's obvious on the whale.
Okay, I get that, but were they dead when they were hit? Were they a floating fish when they were hit?
Were they floating when they were hit? I cannot answer that.
Okay.
We were not.
So we don't know if they were dead already from something else, and the ships have picked them up.
The chances of that are pretty slim based on the necropsies, which indicate roughly time of death and where they were at the time.
Okay. So we're looking at the Gulf. We're very concerned about this. And I mean, you show us pictures early on in this conversation. There were no pictures. You show us pictures. I find no reason to think you'd be lying to us. Okay, great. We've got whales. I've talked to extensive amount of people that fish in the Gulf. No one's ever seen them. All the charters have never seen them. And now, doesn't mean they don't exist, but the idea of trying to shut down traffic in that Gulf is going to affect me and my district tremendously, because we are a port city. And from a defense standpoint, we're working on naval ships, we're working on Coast Guard ships. We've got oil platforms and gas, and so many things are going to depend on the moving of these ships in and out of the Gulf. Please take consideration to who you're going to affect and what's it going to affect, because we've got a 13% favorable rating in Congress. I promise you, in my district, you got less. You got less, and those are the people that pay the bills, and when they turn on us, there's no stopping. We get blamed for everything that you do now, whether it's the fish count or whether it's talking about controlling the speed of their boat, but we got